Good evening and welcome to the BLSI Business and Economics series. My name is Andreas Wasmuth. I'm the convener for Business and Economics here at the Bath Royal. And it's my great pleasure to see you today on a topic that's close to my heart, and that is compassion in business. But before I get on and introduce Bruno Signaco, who will give tonight's talk, just a few housekeeping issues that I want to cover. First of all, just to let you all know that the talk tonight will be videoed. It would also be really helpful if people could remain off video until we actually get to the Q&A session, and also remain on mute, please. That would be very helpful. So please have your cameras off and be on mute. That would be really helpful. Thank you. And in terms of asking questions, that is relatively straightforward. We can do this in one of three ways. So first of all, feel free to put your questions in the chat room, and I will pick them out and then ask them of Bruno in the Q&A session. The second way of doing it, as you probably have all know by now, there is a raise hand facility in Zoom. So if you use that, I will see a blue hand appearing on your screen, and I know that you will actually want to ask a question. And then thirdly, in the old honored-fashioned way, you can just unmute, show your video in the Q&A, and just raise your hand, and I shall pick you out. And that's really it. So coming on to tonight's talk, it is a great interest to me, as you probably have gathered from a previous program, that actually I feel that the way business is being conducted nowadays is far too mechanistic and far too binary in terms of aims and objectives of an organization, and that there is much more scope to actually run more successful businesses by actually taking a different approach. And therefore, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Bruno Signaco, who has written a book on just such a subject, The Art of Compassionate Business. Now, Bruno has a great following online, on social media. He's also involved both in the commercial world and academia, where he teaches students to actually adopt a different way of doing business. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Bruno Signaco.
I like the introduction from Andreas, very clear introduction, and we will talk about the importance of compassion and the relationship between compassion and business. But we will talk about a very interesting word that is not well used in business, that is the word love. Then we will see what love means from the perspective of business activities, how this can be applied to different business projects. So the main objectives of this talk are to have importance of love. Compassion is a sub-product of love. Compassion is a sub-product alongside generosity, gratitude, care, support. All these are sub-products of love, and we will see that love does not apply only to family circles or friends or acquaintances or partners, but can be applied also, and there's a lot of research on this, to business activities. We will explain also how love affects in practice business activities, and we will give example of companies that are acting in a loving way, and also we will provide with some practical examples about companies that are acting in a compassionate and loving way. I like this quote from Umberto Maturana and Gerda Verden-Soller, that two researchers that stated that there is something peculiar about human beings. We are loving animals. I know that we kill each other and do all these horrible things. But if you look at any story of a corporate transformation where everything begins to go well, a company that is successful, innovation appears, and people are happy, satisfied to be there, you will see this is a story of love. So this is quite relevant, and this comes from two scientists talking about love and the importance of love, not only for relationship in general, but for business activities. These two authors observe that love enhances intelligence, and this applies to business activities and non-business activities. Now, if we check the world around and we check current situation, we will see that in the world there is a lot of lack of love. So you see wars, you see crime, you see poverty, you see situations that are terrible, like civil wars, unemployment. These appear like a very unloving world, unloving environment. But if we talk about the business environment much more specifically, we will see also that there are some signs of lack of love. Some companies try to compete with each other in a merciless way, outpacing each other, in some cases developing illegal or unethical activities such as espionage, or, for example, stealing client, or, for example, poaching some talents from one company for this talent to work in another company. So in the business environment, many companies adopt what we call a win-lose approach. They want to win at the expense of others. They want to win to get some profit at the expense of customers. They want to win at the expense of suppliers. They want to win at the expense of the environment, for example, polluting the environment. So you see many signs of companies that are not acting in a loving way. But also in the workplace, you see a lot of what we call the dark side of politics, power struggles, employees competing with each other instead of cooperating with each other. You see a lot of gossiping, malicious gossiping in the workplace. You see a lot of slandering. You see employees that are have some negative strategy, backbiting, one-upmanship, lots of negative strategies. Instead of cooperating and acting together in a joint way, they try to compete with each other, and in some cases try to outpace each other. So you see that both in the business environment and in the workplace, many signs that there is no compassion, there is no love, but the opposite. And you have some definition of why love in general is important from the human perspective. Montagu, that was a biologist, observed that love is intrinsically social, and it is a basic emotional need, as relevant as food. So people cannot live without love. They need love to live and to grow and to prosper, and this is as important as the basic need as food. So, and Hamilton, another scientist, observed that people are naturally hardwired to behave in a loving manner. This scientist also observed that cooperation is key, is intrinsic to the human being. This means that people are naturally prone to cooperate. However, we see a lot of cases that are the opposite way. So people, instead of cooperating, they try to compete, they try to defeat each other. And Griffith also stated that human beings have an instinctive orientation to behave in an unconditionally selfless or loving, cooperative, moral way. So all the three thought leaders agree that love is a very important human need, an intrinsic human need. So this is a universal need. But what is love? Because you might be talking to yourself and probably asking some question, might say, but wasn't this talk about business? Why we are talking about love? Love is not more related to my family, friends, relatives, and we're talking about some partners. So, well, let's give, in my book, I give some definition of love that can be applied to business activities and non-business activity. But then I will try to expand with a specific example of love applied to business activities. Love is continuous care for oneself or and others. This can be applied to business activities and non-business one. Love is the bridge which shortens any distance between people. We will see later that in different work environment and business environments, diversity is the most relevant factor. So, and diversity, many cases bring about differences, conflicts. Well, love is the shortest bridge that can connect people with different views, different perspectives, different opinions. And love is the overt demonstration of support and affection. Love is the facilitation of more meaningful communication, and love is the most valuable capital of a human being. And it's the main element of any fruitful relationship, and is what enrich the organizational environment, the business environment, and allow companies to attain their mission. When a company is mission-driven, this means when they have a strong purpose, the company will try to pursue this mission in a very steady, fast way, in a very loving way, in a very determined way. They will do whatever it takes to attain this mission, to attain this purpose. So some authors observe that love, genuine love, is volitional. This means that it's based on will. It's not something that you feel, but it's something that you have to adopt as an attitude. You adopt willingly a loving attitude toward others. And the person that truly loves does so because there is a decision to love. And this means that here, as you can imagine, I will introduce now love and business activity. We are not talking about the sentimental aspect of love. For example, love that you feel for family, friends. This is a very limited view of love. Here, what we're talking about is a much more humanistic view of love, which implies compassion, care, support, gratitude, generosity, and this can be applied to any type of activities. Love was mentioned by different thought leaders, especially by thought leaders that are connected to humanistic psychology. This means that try to focus on the enhancement of the potential of the human being. And why we are talking about love and business activity, and compassion is a sub-product of love, because the most important factor in any type of business activity is the human being. No business activity can succeed without the human being. Business strategies are designed by human beings. New products and services are introduced by human beings. Agreements and partnerships with other organizations are also developed by human beings. So the common factor of any business activity, regardless of the sector or regardless of the size of the company or country, the common factor is the human being. So the most important focus should be on the human being. However, you will see that companies place the focus wrongly, because instead of focusing on the human being, caring for the human being, taking care of this human being, they focus exclusively on economic aspect, profits, market share, and productivity that are important, but they are not the only aspect to be considered. Also, what happened in the business world? You see zero-sum game. We mentioned win-lose agreements. Companies that try to beat other companies, and one company is winning at the expense of others. Or you see companies that are feeling threatened by other organizations, companies that are acting based on fear. And many thought leaders will observe that when you're acting based on fear, you cannot be compassionate, you cannot be loving. You're trying to push away threats. Companies that are focused on threats, they cannot focus on cooperation with other companies. They cannot develop partnership with other companies. You have also companies that try to deal with customer and feel that customers are challenging. They're difficult to deal with. And companies do not consider the human side of customer. They consider customer like a figure in the database to get some profit from them, instead of trying to find out the unique needs of these customers. In some cases, companies are unloving within the work in the work environment. We mentioned this, lots of politics, dark side of politics, people criticizing negatively each other, people not supporting each other. And many companies take employees as a commoditized people. This means that they can be easily replaced. So an employee is not being productive, we don't care so much what is going on with this employee. We try to replace like a cog in a machine. We replace for another employee. This doesn't look compassionate or loving at all. And also there are lots of conflicts that are affecting business activities that in many cases are solved in an unloving way. For example, companies suing other companies. This is not the most friendly way to solve conflict. Why? Because when companies are using, for example, legal procedures that could be adequate in some cases, they're damaging the relationship. They might solve the conflict, but the relationship with these stakeholders is damaged. So we see many terms used in the business world come from the military disciplines. So you see concepts like strategy, tactics. These are military terms, which implies combat, defeating others, and there is not a term that implies care, support, compassion. Now, there are some studies over the last few decades on cooperation between companies. Well, this show a change in the view, because most of the business literature, most of the business study, most of the business reports are focused on competition, beating others, getting customers, getting more market share. And the majority of these terms are quantitative by nature. So we have, in business, we have two types of aspects that companies should take care of. So you have quantitative aspect of business. Quantitative, I mean things that can be measured, that can be valued. For example, market share, profit, productivity, and sales. And then you have qualitative aspect of business. Qualitative aspect of business implies that we're talking about what cannot be measured, what cannot be counted. For example, camaraderie, loyalty, commitment. Most companies tend to focus on the quantitative aspect of business, what can be measured, and dismiss the qualitative aspect of business, which are connected to the human being, which are connected to the building and strengthening of relationship with different stakeholders. Stakeholders we will define as individuals and groups with interest in our organization. Examples of stakeholders are customers, suppliers, employees that are internal stakeholders, the community, government, and others. So many entrepreneurs say that love doesn't have anything to do with business activity. They believe that they have to get profit, sell more, and that's it. This is the main objective of any business activity. Love does not appear. And as seen previously, love is wishing others the best, supporting and recognizing them as human beings. This means that we are talking about a wider connotation of love. This is a term that has been used in business much more frequently now. It was like a taboo term, the taboo word. Now we see that companies are much more daring when using the word love. They don't apply only to non-business environment, but also they're willing to apply. When a company says that my customer love our products, they're really implying love. When they say that employees love to work for this company, they're really meaning love, but from the wider perspective. So not only the sentimental meaning of love. So, and most businesses tend to link love with non-business environment, close relationships or friends or acquaintances, but this is a very interesting point, implies qualities such as closeness, connection, sympathy, gratitude, generosity, and can be applied to business activities and non-business ones. Now, this is a conclusion that I arrived after 3 years research. It's a very simple and obvious conclusion, but can be a bit counterintuitive. I observe that many companies that are acting in a non-loving way, in a non-compassionate way, tend to focus on the economic parameter that we all know. We call this key performance indicator. Productivity, profitability, quality levels, competitiveness, efficiency. These are all economic parameters that can be measured. Now, when I was thinking about this and seeing different cases of companies that were acting only focused on economic parameters, a question pop up in my mind, and I ask myself where these parameters come from or how these parameters are achieved. Because in practice, these parameters do not come out of the blue. These parameters are achieved, more profit, more market share, how these parameters are achieved. And in practice, if we analyze much more thoroughly and much more deeply, we will see that all these parameters that are relevant for economic survival of the company and economic success, they are the natural result of the interaction between a company and different stakeholders. This means individuals and groups with interest in this organization. For example, they are the result of the company and the interaction with customers, the company and the interaction with its employees, the company and the interaction with community, the company and the interaction with suppliers. This means that these parameters can only be achieved when a company sustains and strengthens their relationship with all these stakeholders. This means that cannot be achieved if we focus only on the parameters themselves, but instead they can be naturally achieved when the company focuses primarily on building strong relationship with those that are supporting the company: customers, suppliers, employees, communities. So this means that by focusing on relationships, building relationships, these parameters tend to be achieved in a natural way. Instead, when we focus only on achieving profits, we focus only on achieving more sales, more market share, we tend by default to dismiss the relationship with suppliers, the relationship with customers, the relationship with employees. And we will see that this brings about a lot of negative effects, because when people feel dismissed, customers feel dismissed, they might look for other companies. When employees feel not acknowledged and not valued by the company, might look for other job opportunities. When suppliers feel that they're not in a fair deal with the company, might look for other business partners. So this is quite relevant, quite important. So many people will say that fear is the opposite of love. Not as many will believe hate as the opposite of love. And many thought leaders will agree on this. Fear is the opposite of love. And you see a lot of companies that are full of fear. Lots of workplaces where employees are fearful of making mistakes, fearful of bringing about new ideas, fearful of engaging in any conflict with others. So, and when companies are full of fear, all people working for this company cannot think clearly. Fear is an emotion that tends to put people in a fight, flight, freeze mode. This means that they try to be attentive to threats around them. They cannot be concentrated on anything but threats that are obviously perceived in their surroundings. So these companies full of fear are less likely to become innovative, because to innovate, you have to be at ease, not fearful, not relying on threats around you for new ideas to come up. And we will comment about fear later, but I want to mention some benefit of a loving attitude toward others. So when companies are becoming more caring, more supportive, we're talking about caring and supportive and generous with all stakeholders, with customers, suppliers, employees, community members, business partners. What are the benefits? Well, there is a lot of research on this, but when companies are loving with different stakeholders, they try to avoid any negative form when addressing others. For example, they try to avoid criticizing in a negative way, or gossiping, guilt-tripping, and in practice, a loving person and a company that has a loving attitude will make others feel at peace, will make others feel valued, acknowledged, respected. On the contrary, when people are not treated in a loving way, for example, by a company, These people will tend to behave in an anxious way, supposing that the company is trying to deceive a customer and trying to sell a product at a higher price and with a very low quality. This customer is not feeling treated in a loving way. This customer might feel anxious, might feel fearful, might feel like a bit confused. So this not contribute to a good relationship with this customer. The same applies to an employee that feels exploited by the company. Might start feeling unrecognized, disrespected, and this employee is unlikely to become productive. It's unlikely to work extra hours. Why? Because they don't feel acknowledged, they don't feel supported, they don't feel cared for. Some scholars observe that there should be always a positive interaction between people and between organization and people. So this means that there should be a loving, positive behavior toward others within a company, but also avoiding any negative or unloving behavior. For example, negative criticism, or for example, attacking others. And this is a very interesting piece of research, the second paragraph. There is a lot of research on a loving attitude in the workplace. People that behave in a loving way, this means that they are supportive, they are generous, they are cooperative with others in the workplace, with other employees, with other colleagues. When people are behaving in general lovingly in the workplace, this work environment tend to bring about increased customer satisfaction, tend to bring about higher employee satisfaction. People tend to go to work, there is lower absenteeism and turnover, and there is also decreased stress level. This means that being loving in the workplace tend to bring about positive economic results. So it's not only that you get on well with others but by getting on well with others you tend to bring about more positive economic results, higher profits, higher market share, higher productivity. Why? Because we saw that all these parameters are always a natural result of relationships. So, and we see also that the concept of love and loving attitude and compassion is connected to emotional intelligence. You might have heard the term emotional intelligence, which implies that we are recognizing our own emotions when relating to others. For example, an employee is recognizing their own emotion when relating to customers, and recognizing also customer emotion, and also try to build a stronger relationship with customers, and also trying to support them. So the concept of emotional intelligence implies being aware of our emotion and other people's emotion, and engaging in a very empathetic way, in a very supportive way with others. Why does adopting a loving attitude work in business? Why does it work? Because there is a principle of reciprocity. This means that when you're the boss, you're in the workplace, and you treat your employees in a supportive, respectful way, they tend to reciprocate. This means they tend to act in similar ways. They tend to support you, they tend to care for you, they tend to work extra hours. Instead, when you treat people in an unloving way, disrespectful way, uncaring way, unsupportive way, people tend to act in a seeming way, in a similar way. This means they tend to withdraw, they tend to be aggressive. So the concept of reciprocity applies for good or for bad. This means you treat people, we're talking about customers, suppliers, employees, and the community member in a loving way, and they tend to support you when you need it. You treat these stakeholders in an unloving way, and they tend to withdraw. But also, there is a principle of interconnectedness in business. This means that you cannot succeed without stakeholders. You cannot succeed without customers. You cannot succeed without suppliers. So you need them. So this means that you cannot succeed in business on your own. No, I mentioned this in other talks. No company is an island. No company can succeed on their own. Company need really to make profits, to have more market share and so on, need customers, need employees, they need all these stakeholders, need community members, suppliers, all of them should be on board, supporting the company. And the only way that can support the company, you cannot force them to support the company. You can encourage them to support the company by building a positive and robust relationship over time. There is also a phenomenon of emotional contagion. When people feel positive emotion and treat others in a respectful way, this positive emotion, loving emotions, tend to infect others, tend to infect in a positive way, and people around tend to feel the same emotion. Instead, when people are treating others and adopting an angry attitude, for example, strong emotion, but many will say that it's very limiting, people around also tend to experience this negative emotion, and this is creating a negative circle. Building strong relationship also increase trust and reduce costs. Imagine, trust is the most important factor in any relationship. Without trust, we cannot make any deal. We cannot do any transaction. So in practice, by building a strong relationship with others, you don't only have cooperation from these individuals and organizations, but you also increase the trust. Now, we are talking about practical aspect of love. In practice, in business and in the non-business world, there is only one secret for relationship to prosper: mutual satisfaction of needs. So companies really know this, and they know that if you only satisfy the company's needs at the expense of employees' needs or at the expense of customer needs, this relationship might not prosper at all. Why? Because it's more than a relationship, it's a transaction. Company can get away once with this. And when we're talking about love is the mutual satisfaction of needs, let's talk about employees, for example. Many companies believe that the employees have only economic needs, for example, getting a good wage or getting, for example, a bonus or a commission or some economic stability. This is one of the many needs that this stakeholder employee has. Other needs could be, for example, the emotional needs, the need of feeling respected and acknowledged, but also feeling valued by others. Mental needs, the need of express their capability fully and becoming much more creative and innovative, and other needs. So this means that most companies have a very limited view of needs. They focus only on the economic needs, and they do not talk about mental needs, emotional needs, social needs, and others. But there is a basic need that everyone has as a human being, that is the need for affinity, building bond with others. Many companies don't foster the development of bonds between employees or colleagues, but they foster competition in order to get much more productivity. This is the wrong approach, because in practice, much stronger affinity bonds allow people to cooperate, to bring about some synergy, to bring about better ideas, more complex projects, and participating also in collective team projects. Also, we can say that love is fundamental when I'm harmonizing relationship and also solving conflict. We saw that many companies adopt an adversarial approach. This means that they try to use ways of solving conflict that are generally damaging the relationship. For example, lawsuits or any type of action, legal action that could be bringing about some outcome, but at the expense of the relationship. Companies that adopt a much more loving attitude, more compassionate attitude, tend to bring about a much friendlier way of solving conflict. For example, negotiation or mediation, which try to preserve the relationship with different stakeholders. They do not try to beat stakeholders to solve conflict, but instead they give priority to the relationship with these stakeholders. Let's talk a bit about emotion and the workplace and business activity. In many workplaces, according to my research, I observe that companies do not talk about emotion in an overt way. However, we saw that the most important factor in business is the human being. And a human being, we call a worker, or we call a customer, or we call a supplier, have emotion. So companies try to only focus on the rational aspect of human beings in the workplace and in the business environment, but they do not acknowledge the emotional side. And by doing so, this means that they do not recognize the importance of emotional side. When people's emotion in the workplace and in the business environment are not acknowledged, this emotion still have an effect on their actions. This means that when customer is frustrated and customers are not allowed to explain their frustration and complaints to a company, this means that the company is shutting down, this customer will still be driven by this frustrating emotion and might leave some negative reviews on this company online. I might recommend friends that they should not buy from this company because the customer feels frustrated and this emotion cannot be channeled in an effective way. You see a new generation of companies that are bringing about more awareness to the emotional side of stakeholders. They allow employees to express their fears. They allow employees to, for example, express their emotion in a civil way. And also, in some cases, they support employees with some counseling, coaching, mentoring activities. And in the case of customers, you see a new generation of customer service officers working for companies that try to not only acknowledge the complaint, but also acknowledge the emotional state of this frustrated customer. Try to let this customer express their emotions so that they can be, the company can be more effective when addressing the thing to be improved. For example, solving complaints or replacing a product or paying a refund. But also, we talk about compassion before as a sub-product or byproduct of love. What is compassion in few words? Compassion is the willingness to support others. But you're willing to support others by acknowledging their emotion and acknowledging their thoughts. And you are also understanding how they feel and understanding how they think. So you are empathetic. This means that you can put yourself in the place of others from the cognitive perspective, means from what they are thinking, and from the emotional perspective, what they are feeling. So when you're compassionate, you tend to feel as they were feeling, and you tend to think in the same way as they were thinking, and you try to offer support to others. I give you an example of compassion in business. Supposing that the supplier has a delay in the delivery of raw material to a company. So you have a company buying from a supplier, and this company placed an order, and the goods were to be delivered, let's say on Monday, and this was delivered 3 days later. A company that is not compassionate will stick to the contract and will penalize, if possible, the supplier. Will say, you deliver this late, I want a discount, I want a reduction in the price, or I want this to be, we want to stick to this contract, says that you will be penalized if you deliver late. This is an example of non-compassionate company. A company that is compassionate with the supplier will tend to first engage in conversation with the supplier. What were the difficulties that made this company, the supplier, deliver this good late? What were the causes of this delay? How can this be avoided in the future? This is a very interesting question also that the compassionate company can ask. How you can avoid it? Do you need some support for you to deliver these goods on time? So this means that you see a completely different approach. The first company, non-compassionate company, tried to penalize, tried to punish the company because of their mistakes or errors. The second company, on the contrary, tried to understand what happened, what were the problems. They don't assume that all was the company's fault. They also might believe that there are external factors affecting this company. They try to inquire a bit more and also try to offer some support. And they will try to agree that this might not happen in the future any longer, so that the relationship could be strengthening over time. So compassionate companies and compassionate people try to care for others because they know that when they care for others, again, the principle of reciprocity, when they themselves are in need, they are more likely to receive support from others. Instead, when you do not support anyone and you only are self-centered, you focus on yourself, being a company or being a person, you are unlikely to get some support or help from others when you're in need. So companies understand, compassionate companies understand the concept of interdependence. This means that they are very clear with the concept that they need to support different stakeholders because they might be in the future in the need of receiving support from them. And they have positive assumption about others. In this case, we saw, in the case of the supplier, when you have positive assumption about others, people tend to behave accordingly in accordance to this assumption. We call the Pygmalion effect. This means instead when you have negative assumption about others, you tend to treat others in accordance, congruent to this negative assumption, and people tend to react in accordingly. It's about respecting others also. How many times you see in workplaces bosses disrespecting subordinates employees, patronizing them, putting them down, treating them like they were children. You see many companies that are micromanaging employees. They do not allow employees to move a finger without the authorization of the boss. This is not an example of respectful boss or respectful manager. Why? Because employees are not children. They're not toddlers that you have to tell them what to do. On the contrary, they have a lot of skills and talents, but because you are continually, as a company, micromanaging these employees, they cannot unleash their potential. And also, love is acting with integrity, no manipulation. How many times you as a customer, I want to ask the audience, you as a customer, you were to buy a product and you didn't read the fine print. And then you bought the product and you discover, oh my God, this is a very bad agreement. Why? Because the company didn't show me full information. If I knew this, if I knew the fine print before, I wouldn't have bought this product. This happened in some cases like transport services or insurance services. And this is an example of companies that are acting in a manipulative way. Companies that try to take advantage of customers with misinformation, incomplete information, or in some cases forcing customers to buy products that they do not like. But why? The company tries to sell this product because they might get more profit, higher sales, and so on. So acting with integrity is about looking for agreements in the business environment that are win-win, that everyone wins. Company wins, customer wins, so the company get the sale, customer get the product that they want, and everyone happy. When the agreements are win-win, the relationship tend to be strengthened over time. When the agreement is win-lose, company winning, customer losing, or company winning, employee losing, this shows some lack of integrity. One party, for example, the company is taking advantage of others. And love is about being generous with others. How many times you see companies that are very stingy? And when things are going well, they don't raise the employees' wages. But when things are going down, they reduce employees' salaries and employees' wages. So this is an example of ungenerous company. And generosity doesn't mean giving tangible things to people, to employees, to customers. You can give intangible things. I mentioned in a full chapter in the book different examples of generosity. For example, a company that is generous might pay a good salary to this employee, but also might recognize the extra work that this employee did for this company, for example, with a bonus, but also the company can be generous and grateful with a thank you note. So writing down, the manager can write down a thank you note, appreciating the employee contribution, or the company can organize an event for the employees that contributing to a project be acknowledged publicly. Being generous implies also providing others with intangible things. You can provide with care, support, advice, some education or training. Not necessarily it's about tangible things, what can be economic things. So some traits of companies with the loving attitude. We commented a lot about different traits: respectfulness, care for others, generosity, gratitude. So what are the traits of a loving company or a compassionate company? And then we will see some example of companies that are in practice acting in a loving way. When there is a widespread loving attitude toward others in an organization, this company is prone to act as follows. The organization will not attempt to deceive customers or manipulate them. Instead, the company will care for customers. And in my research, I observed that companies are not satisfied only on of meeting customer expectation. They try to exceed customer expectation. And I give you a very simple example. I am half Italian, and I'm living outside London, and I went to two coffee shops. And the first coffee shop is a big chain, the two big chains. And I can show you with this example what is compassionate, what is loving, and what is unloving. The first coffee shop that I went, I asked for a cappuccino a while ago, and the waiter brought the cappuccino to the table 15 minutes late. 15 minutes later. This means that the cappuccino doesn't take a long time, was delayed. I didn't complain. I left this place. I went to the competitors. That's very similar. Another coffee shop chain. You know, they're the most well-known chains. And I went there and I asked also for another, the similar cappuccino, similar price. And the waiter came 1 minute later. So they came very quickly with the cappuccino. And they left the cappuccino. I was eager to drink this cappuccino, and they forgot on the table a tray with biscuits. And I told this waiter, sorry, you forgot these biscuits. No, these biscuits are for you. These are a gift for you to enjoy the cappuccino. So you see, two different types of companies. The first one, delivering the cappuccino late, and when I forgot to say, when the cappuccino was delivered, it was cold, so it wasn't drinkable. And the first company didn't meet my needs. I won't go back to this company. This was not an example of a loving company. The second company not only met my needs, they exceeded my needs. They were wonderful. And what company will go back? I will go back to this company because obviously they took care of me. They not only were very supportive, but also they were generous. They gave me a few biscuits free for me to enjoy the cappuccino. So companies try to exceed customer needs are more likely to be considered as compassionate companies. The company, when it's acting in a compassionate and loving way, does not consider other organizations as enemies to defeat. So companies to be defeated. But instead they consider this organization as potential partners, because there are many partnerships between companies in the same sector. But if you consider only as competitors, this means that you have to compete with them, so one wins and the other one loses, you cannot build cooperation ties with these companies. an organization that is compassionate and loving does not de-skill employees. On the contrary, allow this with monotonous and repetitive work. And you see this in many work environments. The work is monotonous. This means always the same, repetitive, and employees get bored. They get demotivated, cannot be productive, always doing the same. For example, stamping paperwork 8 hours a day. This will be demotivating to anyone. Instead, companies that are compassionate and loving, they try to assign tasks to these employees that are aligned with their talents, and they allow them to also enhance their skill with training, support, mentoring, shadowing, coaching activities. The company that is compassionate and loving does not have high profit as the only objective, but also set social goals. For example, they might donate resources to communities, they might have some green project caring for the environment. They do not focus only on economic goals. Companies that are compassionate, they do not treat employees as replaceable cogs, but they treat as valuable resources, and obviously treat different stakeholders in a hearty and natural way. And obviously they try to solve conflict in a peaceful way, in a conciliatory way, instead of using adversarial way of solving conflict like lawsuits. A loving attitude helps people also and companies being more understood in a conflictive situation. You try to look for agreements where all parties' needs are met. Now, in this last part, we will see some example of organization with a loving attitude. Because if not, this will sound a bit abstract, and I want to give you some examples. So we saw that in practice, to summarize, we have love, that is a very big word, can be applied to small circle, family, friends. We call this sentimental aspect of love. This is the most well-known meaning of love. But the meaning that I give in this talk to love is a much broader aspect of love. This means humanistic aspect of love, which implies caring for others, supporting others, being compassionate with others, being generous with others, being grateful with others, and being of assistance and value for to others. So who are these organizations? What are these organizations? Which are these organizations that are adopting a loving attitude? Most of you might know some of these organizations. UPS is a courier company. It's a courier company that obviously deliver, for example, documents, and they use fast delivery services all over the world. This company uses trucks, but they use also a lot of airplanes. They have their own airplanes. And well, this company, they try to focus not only on serving customer well, but they try to produce and bring about a positive impact on the environment, reducing carbon dioxide emission. So this means that the airplanes will be adjusted in a way that they bring about lower carbon dioxide emission, bringing about a less negative impact on the environment. So this means that company does not focus only on economic aspect, but also on environmental aspect of business. And also the company is helping part-time employees, UPS employees, obtain funds for their college educational courses. So this means that the company bring about a more well-being for these employees. Why? Because they empower these employees to get some studies and get qualified in a way that they can become much more skillful, much more knowledgeable, and they can in turn support the company in a much more productive way. So here we see UPS is bringing about positive environmental impact and positive social impact. Company like Google, well, the search engine, and adopt a loving attitude. Why? Because they have some philanthropic activities. This means that they have activities that provide different organizations with grants, and also they volunteer expert knowledge to support communities. And also, so this means that they are community oriented. They don't look only for profit or market share or more economic result. They also try to support community. They try to give back. Google also support employees because they offer free food in the workplace, and this means this is an advantage for any employee. And also they offer also some on-site services such as hairdresser, doctor, physiotherapists, and others, and most of them are free for employees. So this means that the employees are pampered, they're cared for by Google. Dell, the computer company, has developed the legacy of good plan scheme that is about reducing carbon dioxide emission. So this means that they're environmentally friendly, reducing wastage of resources, also contributing positively to the environment, and they're also recycling packaging, what also contribute to the environment and reduce waste. And they're helping community with millions of hours of service, volunteering service, as well as technology and expertise, and have an inclusive and inspiring workplace, what make employees feel much more at ease, more supported. Company like Southwest Airlines is a low-cost airline, is very loving and supportive with customers. It's transparent because they allow a customer to know the final cost without hidden costs. You know that with many cost airlines, low-cost airlines, you don't know how much you will pay for a ticket until you get the final amount. Why? Because there are always hidden charges like debit card charges or baggage charges. This company is very transparent. This means that the customer will know very easily how much they will pay. So this means that they're transparent. They are not manipulative. And this transparent attitude was supported by many customers on social media platforms. Honesty is another example of company that is compassionate. And you see, what is the common factor of all these companies that we are discussing now? That they do not focus only on profit, market share, sales. These are important, but they focus on caring for customers, caring for employees, caring for the environment, caring for suppliers. In the case of honesty, look at the mission of this company: to create and promote great tasting, healthy organic beverages. They produce organic tea and organic juice. To grow our business with the same honesty and integrity we use to craft our recipes, with sustainability and great taste for all. This organization uses fair trade agreement. This means that they pay fair compensation to suppliers. And generally, this company uses suppliers for small local communities that need some support. They buy the inputs, all the ingredients from local communities. So they support communities too. And they also use organic ingredients. So they care for people's health and well-being because they don't use pollutants or artificial ingredients. Tom's is a company that sells shoes. This company donated millions of pairs of shoes to communities. So this means, are these companies obliged to support communities, to support employees? Not at all. But companies, all these companies understand that if they do not support all these stakeholders, they cannot build a strong relationship with them. The conclusion is that Stephen Covey, the famous thought leader, observed that there is a constant state of interdependence which links all people. But this applies to business. This means that no company can achieve its business objective on their own without the participation of suppliers, employees, intermediaries, customer community. So this means that no company can become profitable or reduce costs or launch new product without all these stakeholders, supplier, employees, intermediary, and others. So this means that business environment is an intricate, a complex, and dynamic network of relationship in which each participant has a share of contribution to the whole. So this means that this network between the company and different stakeholders include exchanges of experiences, goals, and tasks, and implies regular communication and implies a strengthening of relationship with these different stakeholders. Customers, suppliers, employees, communities. So we have to understand that companies should not focus only, you see this graph there, on profits, what is the traditional way of doing business, getting more profit, market share, more sales. but focus on people. This means what we call the social aspect of business. This means caring for employees, as we saw many examples, caring for customers, bringing about good product for them, satisfying their needs, caring for the community, caring for suppliers, and also caring for the planet. This means what we call the triple bottom line: profits, people, and planet. And we have to remember this, that the most important aspect in business is the human being. So we can only achieve profits, more market share, more productivity, more quality when we care for the human being, when we foster strong relationship with different stakeholders, supplier, customer, and employees, community members, business partners. Because when we foster these relationships, we tend to bring about these parameters, profitability, productivity, efficiency, in a natural way. I want to finalize this talk with a very interesting quote from Albert Einstein. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in a time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. These are wise words that can be applied to the business environment. This means recognizing the interdependence of everything that exists, the interdependence of the company and the customers, companies and suppliers, company and its own employees, companies and the community. Because if we do not recognize this interdependence and the importance of fostering this relationship with these stakeholders, company will tend to focus only on economic result, and this relationship will be dismissed as a whole. So some references related to this talk, and also, well, this was based on my new book, The Art of Compassionate Business. Well, and you have my website there if you are interested in knowing more about this type of research. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Bruno. That was a tour de force through the subject of love in business. I was actually thinking about this. Only a erudite speaker like you of Italian extraction could have been talking about love in business. Certainly not somebody like me of German extraction would have been able to get away with talking about love in business. So thank you very much. I think it's a very different take on lots of different aspects of business. And it clearly showed that things like market share and profitability are really important measures, but they're the outcome of what you do rather than aims in themselves. Now, please, we're quite a sort of comfortable group, so please all feel free to unmute yourself and show your video. And it would be very nice to give Bruno a round of applause on Zoom, which would be very nice. So if you all on Zoom, that would be very great. Thank you very much. So well done, Bruno. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we've got 25 minutes or so for Q&A. The chat room has been buzzing, so there's lots of things going on, and Fiona has been a big contributor in the chat room. Fiona, do you want to ask any of the questions yourself, or do you want me to read them out on your behalf?
I'm happy if you want to ask them on my behalf. They were just coming out as I really loved all the things you had to say, Bruno. So I was throwing things in as you triggered things in my head. But I guess the first one, maybe I could say the first one that I was most interested was that I wondered if you see if there's a maximum size to a compassionate business. Because my experience was in a global operation with Ford Motor Company, and when I worked with Ford of Europe, we had very strong links between Ford of Germany and Ford of Britain, and I felt it was a very compassionate business. I loved everything about it. I had Ford written through my middle like a stick of rock. But when we came to do a global car, which is what the business people in the US wanted to work with Ford US, it was much more challenging to work with people on a different time zone and a different culture, different work ethic in a way, and it was quite challenging. So I just wondered when you were speaking,
very interesting. Very interesting. Yes.
Or maximum locations, number of locations you can spread.
Yes. This is a principle that doesn't have any exception. Love and compassion apply to any type of business environment. And for example, when you're talking with other people from other cultural environment, other, for example, moral values, we have to understand that we have a common factor with all these people. That is, we are all human beings. We have dreams, we have fears, we have expectations, we have a shared humanity. So when you try to focus on the shared factor, this means our common shared humanity, you will see that the conversation will start to flow much more, because people tend to focus on the differences, for example, different background, different belief, different value, but we are all in this planet with the same type of makeup. This means that we have fears, we have setbacks, we have bad experiences, we have good experiences, we have dreams, we have aspiration, we have also fears and positive emotion and negative emotion. I feel that this is my humble advice, that you should engage in a much more natural way with people, and knowing people in a much more personal level contribute a lot to a much more inclusive project. I devoted a full chapter on natural conversation in my book, which implies not talking only about business, because business can be argued, can be debatable, different views on business, different strategy, but what about the human being? What is your view on this? What is your opinion? Do you have any fear? And also, who are you? Who are you? You're not only a role, you're not only an employee, you're not only a supplier. Can you know a bit more? Can we devote, some people only devote 2 minutes for a small talk to break the ice. But can you know more about these people and what are their fears, what are their expectations? And not only in business or at work, but also as human beings. So by knowing the individual much more and engaging in a much more natural conversation, not taking them as a means to a goal. Because what happens in business that you always take, this person will help me achieve the goal. They are the end, they are the goal. You need to focus on them as the goal. This means that they are the end, the most important end. Because when you know the human being, we saw that the most important pillar in business is the human being. When you know the human being, things tend to flow much more easily. You don't force things. You don't want to force things in business, because we know that this brings about negative results. Instead, when you connect to people in a kind way, in a polite way, in a very curious way, to know more about them. Oh, you have this view, instead of arguing and fighting. Oh, let me know more about this.
Bruno, just to interject, because I think I want to probe you a little bit further on the question that Fiona asked, because Charles is asking a very similar question, and that is,
tell me.
The size of business means companies become more and more structured, more divorced from each other, and more divided up into departments and functions, geographically, but also organizationally. And does that cause make it more difficult for people to act naturally with each other, because they are not in a natural environment? They are in different departments, functions, etc., which are separate.
I understand. Yeah. This can bring about additional difficulties, because when you have a very rigid organizational structure with a lot of levels and a strong hierarchy, this could bring about. But many companies, what they're doing is they have cross-departmental meetings or cross-sectional, cross-area meetings. This means that they include people from different areas so that they can express the marketing department will be expressing their opinion in this meeting. The production department will be expressing, or for example, the branch abroad will be. So they have technology allow us to do this cross-sectional meeting or cross-departmental meeting, which implies opinion from different stakeholders within the company. And this, obviously, big companies have more complexity and could bring about a lot of power struggle within the company. And people don't want to lose their share of power. But we saw here that we're not talking about power, we're not talking about competition, we're talking about the opposite. We're talking about cooperation. And the best way to do this in a very simple way is meeting that you allow people to be included from different areas, allowing them to express their view without judging them, allowing people, company like Google and others, what they use cross-departmental meeting, and they use also spaces where people can be a bit creative and express their ideas freely without being judged. But a big company like Google can do this. That is a multinational company, global company. Small company can do this. The size is not the problem. This means that big company might have probably multicultural aspect that should be taken into account, being sensitive to cultural differences, but this doesn't mean that the most important factor, that is the human being, is not present in every culture. So this means that focusing much more on commonalities. I think that most of the important conflict in business are about differences, focusing more on commonality than on differences. I hope that
Thank you. No, that's very good. Now, Vicky, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to ask a question? You, by the way, you definitely win the Best Bookcase Award today. So it's very impressive.
I'm afraid it's full of non-fiction, not academic books. Well, I've got a shelf of academic books. Just to say, I joined this because I'm very interesting, because I put in the chat here that a couple of years ago I did my doctoral thesis on looking at transformational change in a major international company, and I certainly take the view that the size of company is not such a big influence on how it's the compassion within the company. It's more about what the company culture is like.
Cool.
And I looked at the micro processes that went on in change in 2 departments as a case study for major strategic change within the company. It was in the UK offices, but I had worked across this company in quite a few international environments. I was not expecting to find what I did, because I was looking at how do people on the front line cope with transformational change and keep the business going at the same time. Your classic paradox and conundrum of how do you manage change and stability. And this is in a company where the relatively low turnover of staff, a lot of loyalty to the company. And I had worked for that company as well. As part of the research, I found that the company was very complex in the way it worked. So complexity leadership was types of complexity leadership were very apparent, as were with the transformational change was pretty fraught with paradoxes that were created when the whole original organization completely disappeared and a new organization was created. And I found that people on the front line and actually the managers, leaders themselves, were living in what was called a liminal space, where the old had disappeared and the new was about to happen. And everyone was completely bewildered about what was happening. They couldn't go back, and they found it hard to go forward. And what I found, and this was through qualitative interview techniques, was that instinctively, and it was instinctive, because it wasn't until I listened to the interviews for the second or third time that I realized that what was beginning to happen. The team leaders instinctively found and created spaces to work with their teams, their followers, to work through all the issues dealing with this transformational change. And I'm not talking of big team meetings. They did have stress, but they created stress busting sessions within normal team meetings. So but Vicky, just taps on the shoulder and coffee machine conversations.
No, absolutely. So you seem to suggest, Vicky, because you're not really asking a question, you're more sort of confirming what Bruno was saying, is that there is actually space in business to be far more organic, far more caring and compassionate.
It's about the culture allowing teams to have space.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues is with any change program, there's a tendency to set very tight deadlines.
Yeah.
And as a result, projects overrun. There's very few, in my experience, I don't know if I've ever come across a transformational change that has run according to plan and to budget.
Yeah, no, they never do.
And I think one of the issues is people completely underestimate the time and space that is created, call it unofficially, instinctively, for people to work through and negotiate the change.
Yep, that's Vicky. That's been very helpful. That's been very helpful, Vicky. Because but we need to move on a little bit because we've got 10 minutes left, and there's loads of questions. No, that's very helpful. Well, Bruno, you don't have, there's not really to answer, but I think there's another question here actually by Jude. And, she mentions that the title of your talk was The Art of Compassionate Business. Yes. But obviously, the content was much about love. And I think Jude is just wondering whether the word love, particularly in British businesses, I suppose, is a hard pill to swallow, and whether the use of the word compassion or loving kindness, Buddhist terms, I suppose, would be more acceptable, perhaps.
Yes. This is what the reason why I chose the title for the book, The Art of Compassionate Business, because if I would include the word love, probably the book wouldn't have sold at all because it's too impactful. But I agree, and Judy is right in the way that love and compassion are connected. So compassion is a sub-product of love. I call it a product or byproduct of love. But everything is about love. Love implies a very broad category, which implies many other important principles and values such as generosity, gratitude, and so on. But obviously, it's difficult to swallow this pill in business because people do not talk so much about love in business, except when they say, my customers love our product, or what my employees love to work here. They use it in a very casual way, but you don't see in any business report that they will talk about the importance of love in business. But there are many studies on business, especially a paper called What Love Has to Do with It, that is a paper that focuses on the importance of love for business activities. So this is becoming much more widespread.
Okay, so we've got another question here from Trevor. Do you want to ask it yourself about CSR, CSV? You're on mute at the moment, Trevor, but I'm sure.
Thank you. There we are. Thank you very much, Bruno. I kept saying yes all the way through your talk, because corporate social responsibility and creative shared value are have been well known for a long time, of course. So what is the difference that you're talking about here in terms of compassion or love? Because a lot of companies have come a long way, I think, would you agree, in the last few years in adopting what were the principles of corporate social responsibility, and even the definitions of CSR have changed over the years. And you gave some very good examples of companies that have gone a long way. In fact, I might even say today that it's almost impossible to do really successful business without adopting some of those principles. Yes. Do you feel we've made progress?
Yes. What I'm saying that I agree with CSR, corporate social responsibility, is connected to love and compassion in business. But many companies, you might see, and you might agree with me, that have corporate social responsibility for a special project, a specific project that are philanthropic projects with impact on communities, but they don't adopt the paradigm of caring and loving every single stakeholders. And this, what I'm talking here, they are talking about principles that are timeless. This means that any single decision that is made by the company should be made through the lens of care, support, generosity, gratitude. This means that if the solution doesn't bring about win-win-win-win agreements, this decision won't be made. Many companies only talk about CSR as a way of greenwashing. This means that we try to improve our image, we try to show that we are good with communities, but in practice they're using the same manipulative technique with customers. They try to exploit employees, and we know this. We see this in the news. And companies that have probably a foundation or they have a special project to support community. Here we're talking about much more overarching principles, which are going like a thread, a common thread to all business activity within the company and outside the company. And this means that everyone should win because we're all together in this. We're interdependent. This means that Here we're trying to highlight the three bottom line approach, highlight this, but try to highlight that this is the only way that relationship can prosper. We're focusing much more on the common factor of all business activity, that is the human being and the importance of relationship with the stakeholders. And corporate social responsibility.
In the chat room, Bruno. There's actually something in the chat room which is very similar to this, the relationships between the employer and the employees. I think Fiona made a point that some of the best charities treat their volunteers as employees, and the best businesses treat their employees as volunteers. The other way around. So, it's actually, you actually think of your people in different ways, rather than, you get too fixated about staff and employee as a very fixed way of thinking about it, as somebody higher or lower down in the pecking order. Whereas actually, if you regard people as having a choice as to whether they work with you or for you, you inherently start treating them differently. What do you think?
I agree. And I don't like the word human resources. The word human resources is very well used. Now companies are using other words like people team. Resources are to be used, and in some cases, companies abuse of these resources. People are the most important and valuable asset in a company. They are a meta resource. They should be taken care of. Why? Because they are resources that produces other resources. They are generating new ideas, generating new products, new services. So what I feel that companies tend to focus on the economic aspect of the relationship with employees, with customers, but they forgot other important needs that are emotional needs, mental needs, social needs, and even spiritual and environmental needs. So we focus on a limited aspect of the employee, that is a role, but behind the role there is a person, a human being. Yeah. Focusing only on the role is a very, very small description of this, a simplified description of this individual.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruno. Charles, you've been extremely patient. I know you've been unmuted for a while, and now you're raising your hand, so I'm picking you out to ask you a question.
Right. What you said, Bruno, resonated with me very strongly. For a long time, I've run my own company, I've worked for government, and I've worked in the charitable sector. And that got me thinking about their different ways of thinking about the world, time, resources, etc. And I've had to deal with those. I came to the conclusion we could look at values and strategies and all the rest of it, but fundamentally it comes down to the single individual doing the things you talked about. And so I came up with a sort of a slogan that anyone could use at any level in the company to do the things that you've been talking about. And it's basically, we need a world that's economically prudent, that's environmentally sustainable, socially just, socially responsible, but all in aligned interest. So this idea of the traditional win-win or win-lose, I don't like either of those. I like aligned win. So if you do all that, you are personally spiritually fulfilled, whether you're a Buddhist or any other religion. So in the end, you ask yourself, has my decision or my suggestion, is it good for the environment or does it harm the environment? Is it good for people or does it harm people? And is it the most cost-effective way we can do it that doesn't detract from those other two?
I agree fully.
So it's a simple philosophy that you can apply to any problem. And I've thrown this problem with many people, and they think up impossible things, whether it's doing a PhD or whatever, and you can apply it. And it can be very, very powerful.
I agree.
We need a new story that's very simple that you can explain to somebody in 5 minutes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, on that note, Charles, I think this is a very positive note to leave it on, and because we're coming up to the witching hour. So thank you. I would like us all to thank Bruno once again for an excellent lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I just want to tell you a little bit about a couple of things that are coming up. Next week, there is a talk by a chap called Dr. David Dollar from America. So this will be a Zoom one. He's actually going to Zoom in from New York. He's giving a talk on China 2049 on the 15th of February. And it's actually a talk that is sort of geopolitical, but lots of to do with economics as well. So I think I'm raising that with the Business Economics Group because it's called 2049 China, because obviously the Communist Party took over in 1949. So it's basically tracking 100 years from 1949 to 2049 of China economic growth, political growth, societal growth. So that might be a really good one to have a double bill, so to speak, in February. And then in March, on the 8th of March, we have the internationally renowned British economist, Professor Anne Pettifer, talking to us about why the new Green Deal is vital. So, she's an extremely well-known economist. So again, that's on the 8th of March, which might be very useful to look at some of the environmental issues of economic growth, where obviously today we focus very much on the personal relationships human beings have with each other. So I hope you find those useful. On the 15th of February, China 2049. On the 8th of March is Why the Green Deal is So Vital by Professor Anne Pettifer. So all that leaves me to do is to end the evening as usual. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay sane. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.